All right, we're gonna clean up this rotor with some brake cleaner, and this stuff is cheap, about as cheap as you can get. It's less than $2 a can, and so don't just buy one can. You use it for just about any type of cleanup where you're cleaning up something that's got oil or grease on it. Really handy. They have two different kinds. They have chlorinated and non-chlorinated. They both seem to work equally well to me. I understand that the chlorinated stuff you never want to heat up. You never want to put on hot parts because it'll release deadly chlorine gas. So don't ever use this chlorinated stuff on something you're heating. I guess my advice, I don't know the disadvantage of the non-chlorinated. I've never seen it. They both seem to work just as well. So I guess if I had the choice, I'd get the non-chlorinated. Maybe somebody out there knows the advantage of the chlorinated brake cleaner. They're both about the same price. Just don't heat up chlorinated brake cleaner. I just gotta spray some of this on these parking brake shoes. They're never gonna get used. I don't even know why I'm doing it. It just makes me feel better. Okay, so our parking brake shoes are like brand new, and I bet we could put another 100,000 miles on this car and they'd still be like brand new. So, because it never gets used. So we'll put the rotor on, and look how much easier that went on than the old one came off. The next thing we're gonna do here is we're gonna replace this caliper. And I think a lot of people would push this piston back. I'm not gonna, and the reason I'm not gonna is I think I'm just gonna add additional fluid to the master cylinder. It'll kind of half-ass flush this line out. Instead, if any of that stuff is in this caliper, if any of that brake fluid is, you know, contaminated or what have you, we're not pushing it back, and the fluid in the master cylinder look pretty good, so we'll just pump it up with the master cylinder, and then we'll top off the master cylinder. I think that's the way to go. I'm not going to bother pushing that back. I'm just putting on new ones. All right, my expert cameraman mentioned to me, and I thought, you know, that is a good idea. He said, you know, you might want to mention what kind of clamp you'd use to push this piston in the caliper back if you were to reuse the calipers. I usually use a big C-clamp, okay? But I've seen quite often where someone just uses a big pair of channel lock pliers and just, you know, squeezes them. And if he has to readjust it to a different size, and you could just squeeze that back. That's all. See, I'll even show you moving. I'm not going to overflow those. See how easy that goes in? That's all there is to it. And you just push it all the way back, because it will need to be pushed all the way back to fit both sets of pads in and fit it over the new rotor. Okay, so we're doing brakes on a car. In particular, we're replacing the calipers on a 1999 Chrysler 300M. So a lot of times on videos they'll make a list of tools required and materials are required. So obviously if you're doing a brake job, you're going to need a table saw, right, and a piece of wood. Probably wonder what the hell am I talking about. I'll show you. First we're just going to cut two little scraps. Should always be wearing your safety glasses. I was squinting. All right, now we're gonna be replacing these calipers, and they're held on. The brake line is held to them by a thing called a banjo fitting, and what that really is, it's a hollow bolt, okay? And I'll show you once I gotta take it apart. But the brake fluid flows through this line to this block, and then it flows through this hollow bolt into the reservoir on the caliper. Now, to remove this line, you have to remove this bolt, and quite often they'll be in there quite tightly. And if you just try and hold this by hand, not only is it difficult, when it breaks free, the whole thing's going to jerk on you, and you can break this line right where it attaches to this block. Now, this has happened to me 2 times in a row, replacing rear calipers, and I really don't want to have to replace these calipers too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the old ones, I mean, I'm not going to tighten up the bolts to spec, but I'm going to put these bolts, mounting bolts, caliper mounting bolts, in where they belong, just so I can, it's going to be like an extra pair of hands for me to hold hold the caliper steady while I break that banjo fitting loose. So. Okay, so what I did is I put this caliper back on with its mounting bolts, just finger tight. It's like an extra set of hands. So I can remove this banjo bolt, and everything's going to stay in place. There's going to be less shock to this brake line. And if we're lucky, we won't break that block. We won't break where that line mounts to that block. And these brake lines, they end up being more than you think. You know, they'll be anywhere from right around $10 to over $20 for one of these brake lines. So you don't want to break them if you don't have to. On the other hand, if you live in the salt belt and you got a real crusty one, you're probably going to want to replace it anyway. Now on these banjo bolts, this is what I was talking about. It's just a hollow bolt. It's probably really easy for you to see the hole kind of drilled through the center. It also has a smaller hole right there. So the brake fluid goes through the line and then right through this bolt and then into the reservoir on the brake caliper. Now what we're going to get to is what the hell were those wood blocks for? One other thing too is I took a antifreeze jug. I do this quite often. Cut one side off it. That'll catch that messy brake fluid of all the materials, fluids in a car. My least favorite to get on me or on things is brake fluid. I guess battery acid would be the worst, but brake fluid's my second least favorite car fluid to get on me. And it's really kind of destructive to paint and plastic and things. So that's something you want to catch. So there's our banjo bolt. Now we should be able to take this block off this caliper, the block off and brake line off. So I'll take it off so you can see what's going on. But I thought it was worth my time putting these bolts back in to hold it in place while I took that banjo bolt out. Definitely thought that was worth the time. It only took a minute or so to take that off. Now let's take a look at this. Now see, that banjo bolt went right through here and it held this block on. And you'll notice that there's a copper washer right there. So now this should just break off by hand. Should. There it is. And you'll also notice there's a copper washer there. So a copper washer on this side of the block, copper washer on that side of the block. And that acts like a gasket. This bolt comes through here so that copper washer seals against this block in the head of the bolt and this block and the caliper, okay? See how nice and clean it was where it's sealed there? That's where that copper washer was. Now, 2 bits of advice. We are going to replace these calipers. And we're putting on new ones. We're putting on remanufactured ones. So when you get remanufactured parts, more often than not, you have a thing called a core, and that's your old part. You have to turn that in, and they'll give you credit for it. If you don't turn in your old part, you forfeit that credit. So quite often, you'll see a part advertised at an auto parts store, remanufactured part. Let's say it's $25. It'll say plus core. And if you don't bring your core with you, they're charging you like $40. And what the heck's going on? Well, you don't have your core. Once you turn your core, the price gets to be $25. But whenever you're replacing calipers or wheel cylinders, they'll have these plugs that go over your bleeder screws. Take them out and save them. Those are easy things to lose. The company that rebuilds these parts, they throw these away. They put on new ones, so they're not going to care if you keep them. Okay, so go ahead and keep them. And also, those copper washers on your brake line, if it sticks to your caliper, take that off, because the rebuilders, they don't care if that's on there. They don't even want it. They're not going to reuse it. But you yourself, and you can even keep these banjo bolts if you want. Rebuilders put new banjo bolts on them too. So that's all you have to turn in when you turn in a brake caliper for rebuild. If you want to keep the bleed screw, you can keep that. They aren't going to care. If you want to keep these boots and slag pins, you could keep them. They aren't going to care about that either. It's just the heavy metal casting is about the only part they care about. Now, that being said, these copper washers that are used on banjo fittings, your new caliper should have those included. Okay, so you're thinking, well, then I can just throw them away, right? The answer to that is no, because you never know when you might need them. These things don't take up much room, and they might come in handy someday if you're need one and it's late at night and all the auto parts stores are closed, they do say you should never reuse these copper washers. And the reason why is copper does a thing called work hardening. And that means when you put it under stress, the copper itself becomes a lot harder and it won't seal as well. So these were perfectly matched to the old parts when they got crushed when you torque that banjo bolt to the proper spec. And they'll end up having little grooves and imperfections in them. So they might not seal the next time you use them because the copper got hard when you put the stress on it. But there is a way you can undo that. And I'll show that to you next.
Go.
Okay, they say you're never supposed to reuse these copper washers on that banjo fitting. And the reason behind it is that copper work hardens. You use them once for a certain application and it is going to crush just perfectly to seal any imperfections in that application. So, but also when you put that torque on them, when you stress this copper, it gets harder, the metal gets harder. So it won't have the same capability of sealing if you use it again. That's why they say you should never use them. Does that mean you throw them away? No. Let's just say you're doing everything by the book. You're the kind of guy where if you're replacing a caliper or brake line, you're using brand new copper washers. So, okay, so you're doing a job, it's getting late, it's a Sunday night, you got to drive this vehicle to work the next morning, and you're putting your brakes together, and you drop one of these washers, and who knows where it went. You don't got them anymore. You do have your old ones, though, okay? But you're worried, well, it's probably going to leak because it's the copper work hardened. But there is a way to reverse that, and it's pretty easy. Just take a torch and heat them up, and you don't have to go nuts. It doesn't have to be a whole lot. It's not going to be much. We'll just heat it for about 30 seconds or so. And that right there, sports fans, should be enough to undo any imperfections that were created by work hardening. And now they should be soft enough to do their job again. And this actually has saved my ass twice in the last month. Once it was on the fuel lines for a Honda Civic, and once it was on the, well, it was on the front brakes of this car, I believe. And it was the strangest thing. I didn't lose the new ones. It's the fact that the old ones, I take that back, I didn't lose the new ones, but the new ones had a serious divot in it. I've never seen anything look like it before. A brand new copper washer, and it had it looked like someone took a hammer and punch and just put a ding in it right there, and brand new, and it leaked like crazy. So we heated up the old one, put it in, and we didn't have a problem. So those copper washers, your banjo fitting bolts, they don't take up much room. Just put them in a little jar. You might want to mark what they were for, particularly if it's some type of car or piece of equipment you use quite often. It might save your butt some night.